Okay, I want to talk briefly about the use of BDB. BDB is, of course, the Brown Driver Briggs Lexicon. Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew and Aramaic Lexicon. I think that's the exact name of it. This lexicon is actually it is based on the work of Wilhelm Gesenius. So Gesenius had a lexicon that he developed for a long time, for probably 2 or 3 decades, and then Brown, Driver, and Briggs got together and edited this thing and turned it into BDB. The final published copy, I think, was from 1905, so it's a very old lexicon, but that should not prevent us from seeing great value in this particular lexicon. It is an amazing work, and in my opinion, has not been surpassed by any of the modern lexicons. There's Kohler Baumgartner. There's the Halot, which is an offshoot of the Kohler Baumgartner HALOT, which is the Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament. That one was put out, but in just very few ways, Halot surpasses BDB, but not really. I mean, not in its totality. The only thing is that with Halot, you do have the inclusion of the information from Qumran. So if any of that is relevant, but most of that is not relevant because that's after the biblical period. And so you don't want to read the meanings of words back into biblical Hebrew from Qumran, right? It's anachronistic to do so. So that's mostly irrelevant. One thing that is relevant that is included in Halot and not in BDB is the information on Ugaritic. The Ugaritic finds at Ugarit. There are quite a few finds there, but these two, they affect a very small minority of words, mostly those words that before the discovery of Ugaritic, and those documents were thought to have only been once spoken. The hapax legomena that are in the Hebrew Bible, only spoken once. So some of the information is helpful in regards to Ugaritic, but this is unsurpassed, and for the price point, you cannot go wrong with BDB. It's full of information. Okay, so let's talk about the overall layout real quickly, and then we'll point out some features that prove very helpful, that will prove very helpful for you in using this lexicon. So first of all, we should talk about derivation. Most Hebrew nouns are derived from verbs and not the other way around. So most of the time, it's not that you have a noun and then you derive a verb from it. It's that you derive the noun or the adjective or whatever from the verb. And what that means for the organization of the lexicon is that we have the following arrangement. We have verb, so verbal root, we should say. And then from that, we have derived forms, okay? And so this may include nouns, adjectives, adverbs, whatever, okay? So these are going to be listed under and slightly indented from the verbal root. So what we should note from this is that if we want to look up a word, we have to figure out what the verbal root is. So if that noun, let's say we're dealing with a noun, if that noun has prefixes and suffixes and definite articles and prepositions or whatever added to it, we have to take that off, uncover our 3-letter root, then look up that 3-letter root. So digging for roots is actually going to be a very important skill to learn. Okay, so this is how it's going to be laid out. Now, if we take, for example, the verb salach, you'll notice that up above this, we don't have Samik, Lamed, Chet anywhere, right? So we do have Samik, Lamed, Hey up here. Okay, we could comment on that, but Chet alphabetically is following Hey. So Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod. And so they're listed in alphabetical order by verbal root. Okay, we'll come back and look at the details of this particular entry in just a moment. But let's go up to the second column underneath Salach. Okay, so it's going to go up to the second column, and then look at the next entry. This is written in smaller font, and it's indented just a little bit more. And what this is saying is that Salach, this adjective here, is derived from Salach, the verb, to forgive. And then they give the English gloss, ready to forgive or forgiving. And then they give just a brief little snippet, Ata Adonai Tov V'Salach. You, O Lord, are good and forgiving. Okay. And so they're saying this is derived from it. And if we go on down in alphabetical order, we have another derivative, Salicha, forgiveness. It's a noun, it's feminine, and the English gloss is forgiveness. Then we do have a couple of, we do have some notes on the derivation of this particular one or its appearance. So we might say etymology. So this brings up the issue of format. Let's look at we'll come back and look at this entry in just a moment. But just to recap, we have the verbal root, and then we have anything that is derived from it that will follow the verbal root. We have salach here, an adjective, then we have a noun, a feminine noun that follow it. Okay, in smaller font, indented just a little bit more, and there we have it. Okay, now if we look at this actual entry, there are a couple of things that we should note. So we're looking at salach down here. This is fuzzy, but this is the Strong's number. Once you learn how to read BDB, you don't really need Strong's. Okay, Strong's is just a summary of BDB, essentially. A very brief summary. It's inadequate in some sense. But if you wanted to teach someone to use BDB and they don't know Hebrew and they wanted to glean whatever they could from it, then you basically have the Strong's number here. You go find the Strong's number, look it up, and there you can use BDB without knowing Hebrew. Okay, so it's linked to Strong's for the sake of those who don't know Hebrew. Okay, now several things that need to be noted here. First of all, this is a dagger. It's not a cross, but a dagger, and this dagger means that every instance of a particular word in this entry, this particular word, has been mentioned in this entry. Okay, and this means that almost every entry that you see on this page is exhaustive. It's not a summary. This stuff is not. These are not summaries. There are some words that are not exhaustively covered, but most of them are. Okay, so that's what the dagger means. If you see the word in brackets, like we see this one, if you see the word in brackets, it means that this exact form does not occur in the text. This is a reconstruction. Okay, that's what these brackets are indicating. So this is a cow, katal, which he's going to call a perfect third masculine singular, and he's just saying they're saying this third masculine singular form does not occur in the text. That's all that bracket is. Part of speech is given, and then an English gloss. This is not a definition. This is an English gloss. It's just telling you, well, if you wanted something quick to use to translate this, here are a couple of suggestions. Now, everything within these parentheses is what we call etymology. Okay, so etymology, E-T, etymology. And so basically this is derivation information. And it's also derivation and cognate information. Okay, so cognate simply means, what does this, do we see this in other languages? Or do we see this in a later biblical Hebrew? Do we see this in related texts? What is the etymology? What can we use to relate this to languages and dialects around us, okay? And so this one is not very large. Some of them are larger than others, longer than others. Like look over at Salal on the next page. You can see this parenthetical section is quite long and goes all the way to here. And most of this, if you're in, let's say you're in course A, you can ignore this for the most part. I mean, unless you've already studied like Qumran Hebrew or Arabic, they have related some of these things to Egyptian, right? So if you studied some of these things, then this stuff is relevant for you. But otherwise, you can just not worry with it, right? It's irrelevant for you. And this current entry, we have this T, the Gothic T, Salach. This is basically the Targumim, the Aramaic translations of the Hebrew. This is the form that you would see, Salach. And then in New Hebrew, Salicha, forgiveness. That's the only related form that you see in New Hebrew. Evidently, they don't use it that much. New Hebrew just refers to a late biblical Hebrew. Okay. All right, so then after the etymology, so etymology is first in parentheses. Okay, then we have morphology. Morphology, and morphology is going to begin with it's going to be a discussion of each of the forms. Okay, that's what it's concerned with. What type of forms do we have of this particular verb? And in these, you're going to have, it's always going to begin with the kal, which is the basic binyan, we call the binyan or the stem. And then it's going to describe all of the kal forms, okay? Now, there are verbs that don't begin with kal, or they don't have a kal form, and so they won't use the kal. They won't even reference it because it doesn't occur. They might begin with a PL, right, if that's the only form that occurs. But if there is a kal form, it will be listed here. The next is perfect, PF, and that is for those of you studying with eTeacher, the perfect PF equals perfect, which equals katal. Katal. This is a katal form. 2ms, salachta, and you can figure this out just by looking at the forms. So like this one, salachta, you forgave. Salachta, pausal form. Salachti, first common singular form. And then the next thing that is mentioned is the imperfect. So we had the perfect, the kal perfect, and then next we have the imperfect, and the imperfect is listed as IMPF, and this equals imperfect, which equals yiktol. Okay, so katal and yiktol, perfect, imperfect. That's the scheme that they follow, and that's what most people follow on this side of the Atlantic, is perfect and imperfect. Okay, that may be changing some. Then we see the other parts of speech, and in here, they won't give you every single form that occurs, but a very good representative sample. So if there's an unusual form, you will see it in the morphology. But these are pretty straightforward. Salachti, salachta, and then the imperfect, which is here, yislach. So they always give you an idea of what the theme vowel is, the patak instead of a holem, because of the presence of the chet. And then we have the first common singular form, eslach. Okay, those types of things. And then next we have the imperative. Okay, and next we have the infinitive. IMV is imperative, INF is infinitive, and these are all of course in the kal binyan. Okay, and then in the cow, they'll begin to discuss semantics. So we have etymology, morphology, and then semantics is woven in there. Etymology is in parentheses, morphology. If you have, let's say you have a cow, so morphology will be done in accordance with the binyanim, or the stems, as they are also called. So, and then semantics, or meaning, is woven into the morphology section, let's say. So let's say that, so he discusses the cow, right? So you don't need to, their rationale on this is, well, we don't want to discuss the cow and then discuss the peel and then discuss the hifil and then come back and discuss what the cow means, right? You don't want to do that. So if you lay out the morphology of the cow, the forms, then you need to discuss the meaning of them as well. And so that's what they go about doing. We have a participle active here that I looked over. And then all of these, there's an index at the beginning of BDB that has all of these symbols. It has all of the abbreviations. They put a little tab there, mark that, because it's very useful. So then they give the meaning of the cow: to forgive, to pardon, always of God. In the, so absolute, we'd have to look at the context in Numbers 14:20. Now the J, the E, the D, and the P, this is leftovers from a critical time when there was critical scholarship had identified 4 sources within the Pentateuch, and they called it JEDP, the Yahwist, the Elohist, the Deuteronomist, and the priestly sources. So you can ignore those now. Maybe it's helpful in some way, but not really. And you have some discussion of syntax, but not much discussion of syntax. Like here we have the letter C with a dot, which means cum, which is with, Latin, and then with the lamed, and then forgiveness of the sin. And so that's what he says. It means with the lamed, forgiveness of the sin. So there is some discussion of syntax, but not very much. It's very difficult to create a lexicon that also talks about relationships within clauses. You don't really want to do it. It's because it turns into like massive volume. You can't do it. So you have to limit your scope in a lexicon, and that's what they've done. They've chosen to exclude syntax. You have to work that out on your own. And then the next binyan that they talk about is the nifal. So once again, they give all the forms. They give the morphology of the nifal, a little bit of syntax with the lamed, a technical term in the code of P, with priestly code. It shall be forgiven to him. So that's with the lamed. In the nifal, which is a passive binyan normally, it shall be given to him, and it's a perfect form that he's quoting here. And then they give several examples of it, and basically every example is mentioned here. There are, and that's because of the dagger, right? So I said at the beginning, the dagger indicates that every instance is mentioned. If you look though at like Lamentations 3:42 plus 2 times, this is a shortened way of saying, okay, it does occur in Lamentations 3:42, and maybe that's the essential use of this word in that text, plus 2 other times in that text. So it's not going to quote every single time, but it's going to give you a count of the use of that word in that book, that particular book. Okay, like here we have also, well, this is Numbers, evidently. So Numbers 14:20 plus 2 times. The imperfect 30 verse 6. So they're assuming that they're talking about numbers still. 30 verse 6 plus 4 other times, you see the imperfect 3ms. So they do kind of summarize sometimes. 30 verse 6 plus 4 other times. Okay, so that's basically it. So we have etymology. We have an English gloss usually. We have the part of speech, which is here. We have an English gloss, etymology, all the way down through this parentheses. Then we have morphology, and then woven within the morphology is the semantics of that particular binyan. And then after that binyan, they'll go to another binyan, and then that's it. That's the layout of BDB. Okay, and just remember that in order to look something up, you should find the verbal root first, right? That's what you want to do. Now, a last parting note: if you can get a hold of some of these tabs, and some of the bigger tabs and harder tabs, label them Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, and stick them in order in your lexicon. And this will cut down on your search time immensely. Now, don't let it be a substitute for not memorizing the alphabet, but it will cut down on your search time immensely. And we don't need to be wasting time, because you can get sidetracked if you waste too much time. Okay, so I'll leave you with that, and I hope this has been beneficial to you. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.